election. Now, the new president, Anura Kumara Dissanayake, needs a strong victory, that is, in order to push ahead with his reform agenda for the debt-ridden nation.
Early results indicate the president's coalition, the National People's Power, could be headed for a landslide win. The coalition posting major gains in both South as well as the North. Tamil parties appear to have suffered significant losses. Sri Lankans typically back the president in the general election, especially if it's held soon after presidential polls.
ඉතාමත් තීරණාත්මක හැරවුම් ලක්ෂයක් පෙන්නුම් කරන මැතිවරණයක්. මේ මැතිවරණයේදී ජාතික ජනබලය ඉතාමත් ශක්තිමත් පාර්ලිමේන්තුවක් සඳහා ජනවරම අපේක්ෂා කරනවා. ඒ ජනවරම ජනතාව විසින් අපට ලබා දෙන බව අපිට විශ්වාසයක් තිබෙනවා.
The left-leaning president needs a parliamentary majority to appoint a full-fledged cabinet and deliver on his campaign pledges of cracking down on corruption, cutting taxes, and expanding welfare schemes. A failure to win control of the House could lead to a policy logjam.
As citizens, we like to work in a digitalized environment, right? And we like to have a government where they enable that and they make sure to provide the development into that areas.
Where there is no corruption and the people who are supposed to do their work, do the work they are supposed to do. And everyone is friendly with every other religions, person or racial.
And for more, we are joined by Asanga Abeyagoonasekera, the Senior Fellow and Executive Director of South Asia Foresight Network at the Millennium Project. Thank you so much for joining us, Asanga. So votes are still being counted, but it seems Mr. Dissanayake is on track to secure a strong majority in Parliament. Just how significant will his win be, and what do you see as the key factors behind this?
Definitely, it's a clear victory, a landslide victory. If you look at the provinces in the south and all that, 70% of you see a significant increase in their voter base, reducing the old guard, the parties like the SJB, as well as the opposition parties. So it's a historical victory because this is the first time Sri Lankan legislature will have a Marxist-oriented political party. Basically, NPP, the JVP, basically their main party, which is JVP. So from 3 seats to, I would say, they might even get closer to the previous election of Gotabe, which is 145 seats he secured in the last parliamentary election. So a majority.
Asanga, thank you very much for that. I just want to ask you about a couple of things, a couple of observations. One is the turnout and voter enthusiasm, which I understand is slightly lower than the September presidential election. The other observation is that a lot of senior, MPs chose not to take part. I mean, can you take us through, why it was the case that they chose not to carry on, and also why enthusiasm was a little bit lower?
I think the fatigue with the back-to-back elections, like we had the election about a month ago, so maybe people are sort of fatigued with these election cycles. But AKD, who's the president, was very clever as well as very strategic to have immediate parliamentary elections. So it would sort of reflect his victory would sort of, continue. Basically in the parliamentary election. Why the old guard basically have been rejected is clearly because of multiple, government processes, the inefficiency, the corruption issue, are the serious factors. So I think it's a clear reading by the senior politicians as well as the ones who have been serving in the legislation not to contest is because of the new sort of change that the people are expecting, as well as the new faces that they would like to see. Here's a huge risk that Sri Lankan, I would say, the voters have taken because all of these new people who are walking into the legislature has no experience in previous government. So there is a risk factor. There is also a factor on checks and balances because a party that is securing absolute majority, as well as how they would sort of implement the democratic process, especially the checks and balances, because in the previous parliamentary round we had issues on checks and balances.
Asanga, talk to us about the role the non-elite constituencies like the working class people and middle class will play in determining the outcome of this election, and how crucial is their support for Mr. Dissanayaka's long-term political survival?
No, he has spoken to them really well. He has communicated to them really well. So on both the elections, you can see that the communication strategy has been a huge success. They have managed to get the middle class, the upper middle class, as well as the lower income basically, addressing the issues, the economic woes that they were, the price increases, many issues that they were going through. And so far, from his presidency to now, the appointments he has given, as well as how he has handled it, he has handled it really well, I would say. Even with the IMF, there is progress. So whatever the sort of the opposition that he has managed to sort of capitalize. He has managed to address them. But again, there are a lot of promises, a lot to be expected by the voter base. So, like I said, it's a very highly volatile voter base, shifting from one end, which was voted for Rajapaksa 4 years ago, and now they have moved into a new leader. So it's I would say again, a very highly volatile voter base.
Asanga, I want to pick up on the point you made about the IMF. AKD has flip-flopped on Sri Lanka's agreement with the international body, first saying he wants to renegotiate, now saying he'll go along, with the conditions. Now, trying to meet these conditions cost the previous president, Ranil Wickremesinghe, his job. So I'm wondering, will he be able to, fulfill those requirements and at the same time make sure that Sri Lankans don't get disenchanted with things like, more taxes as he tries to, meet those conditions from the IMF?
Yeah, Ranil Wickremesinghe did stabilize the country. If you look at, he did make some very important measures, policy decisions, especially with the IMF reforms, so introducing them. Anura Kumara, in his campaign, in the presidential campaign, like you rightly said, he did mention about bringing in sort of renegotiating. But what I see is he's continuing what Wickremesinghe has been sort of doing. Some of the, for example, the projects such as the Adani project, he said he would cancel, but he has now agreed to review it, which is a better position. So you see him sort of, bringing in sort of more prudent as well as pragmatic reforms. So that is a good sign that I see.
Okay, Asanga, not only economic recovery, but his ambitious pledge also include abolishing executive presidency, fighting corruption, etc. You mentioned expectations are high. So how long can Dissanayake realistically remain in power if his government fails to deliver on these commitments? Do you think Sri Lankans will be patient, or will the pressure for change mount quickly?
No, that's a very important question. The structural reforms to the constitution, the new party who has no experience coming in with an absolute majority, making structural adjustments such as abolishing executive presidency, there is a huge risk factor in here. So they need to take calculated sort of measures. They need to have public participation, so they cannot rush into structural reforms. So that's something that I believe the new president would have to sort of learn from the previous mistakes, what happened in 2020. When they got the absolute majority, they did try to make constitutional changes, such as, bringing in more power to the center, like the president. So that, disturbed the independent institutions we had, that sort of, influence, sort of bringing in more executive power into one person. So here, Anura Kumara has mentioned that he's going to abolish it completely, and which is something that majority of Sri Lankans want. But then, if you are doing overall structural changes, then it would impact the entire, government as well as the processes. So here, you need to be very careful on the democratic processes because the opposition will be reduced significantly. If you look at this trend of the votes that has been casted. So it will be reduced. So there will be issues on the voices of opposition as well as checks and balances for the democracy. So that's also really important. So on corruption, you mentioned that's another important area what every Sri Lankan wants to be addressed. There are a lot of issues that has been raised by IMF governance diagnostic on corruption. So AKD, the new president, has mentioned that he is going to strengthen the corruption mechanism, such as the bribery commission and various other institutions. So it's yet to be seen. So with the new ministers as well as his new formation of the government, we need to see how he's going to sort of strengthen these mechanisms.
All right, Asanga, thank you very much for your time and your insight this morning. Asanga Abeyagoonasekera, Senior Fellow and Executive Director of South Asia Foresight Network at the Millennium Project.